Fancy intro music, yeah! Woo!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and hey, don't forget to join us tonight on Twitch, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, if you have not already, twitch.tv/RevDeuce, where we're going live to talk about some of this arc. But what I want to do today is I want to continue on what we kind of started yesterday, hitting some of this refresher stuff, but also maybe bringing up some points that you could have forgotten about Star Trek Fleet Command. And today I want to focus on the battle mechanic, how it works at the basic sense. And we'll refer to some more complex videos I have, like explaining mitigation and things like that. But I actually want to start from the very get-go, or the very start of everything, and show you how it works. And this is for the newer players in the game, but also a refresher I think is good for all players in the game. And this will be part of our series that we're doing that teaches the basics and kind of gets everybody into some of it, because there's a lot of questions out there of how things work. And I actually got asked questions by a few veterans about how officer synergy bonuses worked when it came to ships. So, we're going to cover all of that today. So to jump right into it, we're going to start with this here. And this is just any ship. So the things that I'm talking about are not going to be specific to something like, the Franklin A, which is right here, and a swarm. Now, the first thing I want to cover, battle triangle. And if you go to any hostile, you can click the little icon by their style, and you'll see here is the triangle, which means battleship, explorer, interceptor. Now, this concept is not new to these type of games. If you go to like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, heroes will have some form of battle triangle. It simply means that there's some types that are better than other types. And the way that that works in this game is piercing versus mitigation, which we'll cover in a little bit. But essentially, you have a natural advantage going through this triangle. Now, there are some things that aren't part of the triangle. Survey ships, armadas, and defense platforms do not have a bonus. So the way that they will get, defending or attacking in terms of how they play out in a battle log is a little bit different, but that's kind of the basics of that. So if you're in an explorer, like I am here in the Franklin, I have a natural advantage over an interceptor. And then if it was a battleship, they would have the advantage over me. So let's go into one of these ships. We're going to pull up my auger, which is a level 34 epic battleship. And let's hit the officer tab here. I want to talk about synergy and crew loadouts. And you can see I do not have my full bonuses because I've been stripping officers because, well, away teams take a lot of officers sometimes. And if we just throw Carol in here, you can see that percentage goes up. So what I want to talk about is synergy and how it works. The first thing is to explain the basics of synergy. And real quick, I want to just point out, because this has gotten asked even by veterans, how synergy works. Synergy is only for the captain's ability of an officer. So if you're looking at officer like Yuki, her captain's ability is right there. It's a shield strip, but it's called Disrupting Field. Decreases the shield health of the opponent's ship by 15% each round. And that is a flat strip. So it is just going to be 15% of whatever those shields are. So if you got 1 million or 100,000, it's the same percentage, which is one of the reasons that Yuki is such a good PvP officer for a long portion of the game. But she's getting a +5 bonus. If you were to actually look at Yuki, if you have her in your officer menu, her captain's ability is actually 10%, but because she has synergy, it's +5. Now, I want to note that that +5 does not help the officer ability of either officer. So synergy, and this got asked to me yesterday, was because is synergy being this equal bar sign, does that mean it goes both ways? No, it only affects the captain's ability. And synergy is activated of officers that are in the same group. Not the same class and not the same faction, but the same group. And that group for Yuki would be Section 31. Other Section 31 officers will provide synergy to the captain. And depending on the type they are, they'll provide higher or lower synergy. So if you had a Section 31 officer that was an engineering officer, see the little icon under Yuki, then they would not provide as much synergy as Marcus, who is a command officer who provides more synergy because they're different types. There are 3 types in the game: command, engineering, and science. So with that in mind, load out your officers as you will. Now you can do several different variations of that, but just keep in mind that there are different crews, like auxiliary control. If I put that up here, just like Honor Guard Wharf, no synergy at all. We're going to put that back down there because that's not as good. Just a basic crew loadout here for PvP. Now let's look on the right side, because this is what we talk about being very important for how this works. So these are bonuses that you can get from having officers on your ship stats, and they will apply to different aspects. Like attack is going to increase your DPR. Health is going to increase your ship's, health, the whole points. that it has by this bonus. Something to note, whether your bonus is 100% as a max, 300, 500% will vary from your ship. But once you get past the max bonus, the points do not matter unless you have an officer that uses stats for that. So for example, I had Yuki on here. Let's take Yuki off. So you see how I've got 13,245 defense points. Me going up to 15.5 thousand does nothing for the ship. The bonus stops at its max. But an officer like Marcus, his officer ability actually uses defensive stats to increase piercing. So in that instance, you actually do want more defense to make Marcus more effective against what you're fighting. Now, we've explained in another video what Marcus does, and I don't want to take up too much of that here because this is just a basics. But just to know, your officer bonus does not need to continue to go up and up and up. And you can even say that if you're not using an officer like Marcus, so if you just had Gorkon, Honor Guard Worf, and Yuki, none of these really use, Yuki's officer ability does, but none of these really use the officer abilities. Or just imagine that they don't. There's an argument for if you've already at 300%, don't add any officers. You only need as many as you need to get to 300% or whatever the max percent is for you, because it is different ship to ship. So if I go over here to one of my old ships, like my Tala, or if I go, let's see who you are, Max Tala. This is the one that I have that's finished. I go to officer, you see my officer bonus is 240 at my max. But look, see how this 240 is right here? It doesn't matter if I take it any higher. We are what we are here. You're not going to go any higher unless you have an officer ability using it. So there's no point in adding to that, like I said, unless you need to. So keep that in mind. Now, as a lower level player, harder to max that out, but still very doable. Let's talk about officer types and where to use them. So right now you see on this ship right here, I'm using Picard, Beverly, Talon for fighting hostiles. And there's some predominant hostile crews in the game, or you're really just two primary ones. And you have Chen and Talon, one versus interceptors, which is Talon, which is why we're fighting interceptors here, and Chen, who fights energy. Now, it's important to read these officer abilities because they don't work against all types of ships. So if we go and we sort by level here, and let's take a look at Chen, read the ability right here. Get that water barrel out the way. If the opponent is a hostile. Now, this can be really, it feels ambiguous. Hostile would seem to indicate anything that's a bad guy. Not the case in Star Trek Fleet Command. And what I mean by that is only works against reds. So when we talk about various hostiles, there's three different kinds of players or, NPCs that can be hostile in the game. The first are going to be reds. So the red triangles. This is a red. This is the type of ship that when it says hostile, it's really gearing you to face off against. So Chen, Talon, hostile, reds. It's important to note that does not include gold bosses. So golds are hostile. So if you were to go to your combat training mission. So I've got a combat training mission level 48, but the basics of combat training missions are pretty much the same. You're going to, I can actually go there in a minute and a half and show you that before IA blows it up. But combat missions are typically going to spawn in the system that you were home to when you got that mission. But gold bosses do not work the same way as red bosses. So you wouldn't use a Picard Beverly Chen or a Cadet Uhura Cadet McCoy Chen versus them. You would use something more like a PvP crew, something like I have here on this boat. You would use Yuki, Marcus, Khan. It's important to read the officers because remember, Honor Guard Worf is only a PvP officer, only works versus players. So this wouldn't work against a gold boss at all. So these are things that you have to keep in mind when loading out crews and understanding the basics of the battle logs to make sure that you're using the right officers. Let's take a look at a battle log and talk about its basics real quick before we wrap this up. So here is a log. This is just displaying how much damage was done and how it worked. So you see officer abilities right here at the top. They will activate at varying points. And then each particular shot will have 3 layers. So this is the amount of damage that the enemy did. Mitigation is basically a glancing blow. And that's where we talked about defense in terms of stat bonuses, and then mitigation. This is where it applies right here. It's how much you can force to glance. The maximum mitigation that you can get is 71.19. The lowest mitigation you can get against hostiles is about 15-ish%, and against PvP, 16-ish%. Why those numbers are important? Probably for basics, they're not. But for me, I'm currently mitigating 63.5%, just as an example right here. on this shot against this swarm cluster. And it could be even higher if I'd actually have more stats thrown in to help Beverly Crusher. I could do better. If I remember right, I actually don't even have very many officers because, once again, away teams. So anyway, that's the glancing blow. That's how much doesn't even reach your ship. Then you have shields, and then finally hull. Hull damage obviously is what's going to determine whether you blow up or not. Now, shields will naturally stop 80% of any damage that is not mitigated. So after mitigation, whatever's left, shields will typically stop 80% unless there's an officer that changes that. And then finally, you're left with hull damage. So originally we had what? 20,855, and you had 1523 reach that. So 1523 divided by 2855, we got 7% of the actual damage created made it to the hull in this particular look. So let's go and take a look, and I want to make sure I show gold bosses real quick before this gets bloated up. I'd be really surprised if this doesn't get bloated up. So here is my gold boss, or mission boss, because missions can look the same way. The gold hostiles will be loaded out differently. You will not use something like a pipe roach in. You will use a crew dedicated more towards PvP, but make sure that you're not using a PvP only officer. There are a third set. So you have blues, which are just player ships. You have reds, which are regular grinding hostiles, and then golds, which are mission hostiles that you really want to focus on. Good to lithium in those missions, by the way. Good to lithium. So anyway, those are the basics of battle. We've got the battle triangle, how officers work in the game, and ships themselves. So we can talk a little bit about different weapons types, but at the end of the day, each ship has a lot of uniques. Like this Burrell has energy weapons and one photon, which is a kinetic weapon. In terms of loadouts, there are officers who focus on energy versus kinetic. There are a lot of different things here, but the basics of battle are simple. Go after battle triangle, helps the most. Hey, cool. You're going to come take me out, Beast. I appreciate it. I'm actually going to run from you. Make you do some work for it. Make you do some work for it. Battle triangle, officers, battle log. Make sure you're taking an eye on those and seeing how they work and how it applies to you here in the game. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comment section below. The basics of the game are pretty easy, but can get a little bit squirrely when we start talking about math and how things actually add up. And I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of destroying my Tala, so I'm going to recall. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Deuces, that's me. We'll catch you on the next one. We outie, and hopefully you're enjoying our Back to Basics segment. Questions down below.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.